Have you ever wondered what the connection between recession and inflation is? These two economic phenomena are often mentioned together, yet they seem so different. A recession, typically characterized by a slowdown in economic activity, job losses, and a general sense of financial gloom. Inflation, on the other hand, is when prices of goods and services rise, eroding the purchasing power of our hard-earned money. To understand this, we need to take a step back and see what led to the most recent recession in 2023. The year 2023 didn't start off on a promising note. In fact, it was a year that would be remembered for its economic challenges. The first quarter kicked off with a significant drop in the stock market, a warning bell that echoed the sounds of economic turmoil. Investors began pulling back, caging their capital in safer havens, and this retreat from risk was the first sign that things were about to take a turn. As we moved into the second quarter, the employment rate began to wobble. Jobs were not as plentiful as they once were, and this was mirrored in the rising unemployment figures. This job market instability was another key indicator that the economy was not on steady footing. By the third quarter, consumer confidence had taken a hit. The public was spending less, businesses were investing less, and the economic wheels were slowly grinding to a halt. The GDP, a critical measure of our economy's health, began to shrink. This contraction was a clear signal that the economy was in trouble. And then, as we rolled into the fourth quarter, the final piece of the recession puzzle fell into place. Interest rates began to rise, making it more expensive for businesses and consumers to borrow. This tightening of the credit market was the last straw that broke the economic camel's back. Throughout the year, these economic indicators, the stock market, the employment rate, consumer confidence, GDP, and interest rates, all pointed towards an inevitable conclusion. They were the canaries in the economic coal mine, signaling that a recession was on the horizon. And thus, by the end of 2023, the economy had entered a recession. While the recession was taking hold, another economic phenomenon was unfolding: inflation. Inflation, in simple terms, is the rate at which the general level of prices for goods and services is rising, and subsequently, purchasing power is falling. Central banks attempt to limit inflation and avoid deflation in order to keep the economy running smoothly. Now let's paint a picture of what happened in 2023. As the recession was beginning to grip the economy, inflation rates started their upward climb. This was like adding fuel to the fire. As inflation rose, every dollar started to buy a smaller percentage of a good or service. Your morning coffee, your weekly grocery run, the cost of a new car, everything began to cost more than before. This is where we see the domino effect of inflation. As prices increased, consumers had to dig deeper into their pockets to afford the same goods and services they were accustomed to. This led to a decrease in overall spending, which in turn led to businesses earning less revenue. The less revenue businesses earned, the less they could afford to pay their employees or hire new ones. Unemployment began to rise and the economy spiraled further into recession. But here's the thing: a moderate level of inflation is not necessarily a bad thing. In fact, it's often a sign of a healthy economy. But in 2023, inflation rates didn't just rise, they skyrocketed. The increase was so rapid and so high that it started to erode the purchasing power of consumers at a time when they were already grappling with the effects of a recession. Inflation became a double-edged sword. On one hand, it was a symptom of the economic crisis. On the other, it was exacerbating the very same crisis. This is what economists refer to as stagflation, a situation where the inflation rate is high, the economic growth rate slows, and unemployment remains steadily high. So it's important to remember that inflation didn't just happen in a vacuum. It was not an isolated event, but a crucial factor in the recession. It was a catalyst, a spark that ignited the economic downturn and made it burn brighter and hotter. As we can see, inflation didn't just happen in a vacuum, it was a crucial factor in the recession. So how exactly do recession and inflation interact? Let's take a closer look at this complex relationship. In our economic landscape, these two phenomena are closely intertwined, often playing off each other in a cyclical dance. Let's start with how inflation can provoke a recession. Imagine a scenario where prices are rising rapidly. This is inflation at play. As prices rise, the purchasing power of money decreases. This means that the same amount of money can buy less and less. If this trend continues unchecked, people and businesses start to struggle. They can't buy as much with their money, and the cost of living and operation goes up. This can lead to reduced spending, slower economic growth, and eventually, a recession. But the story doesn't end there. Inflation can also exacerbate a recession. When an economy is already in a recession, high inflation can make the situation worse. It adds another layer of uncertainty and hardship. People become even more reluctant to spend, businesses are less likely to invest, and the recession deepens. Now let's flip the coin and see how a recession can lead to inflation. When an economy is in a recession, central banks often respond by lowering interest rates. This is done to encourage borrowing and spending in an attempt to stimulate the economy. However, if this is overdone, it can lead to too much money in the system. And as we've seen, when there's too much money chasing too few goods, prices start to rise, and we're back to inflation. So you see, recession and inflation are not isolated events. They feed off each other in a cyclical manner, each one influencing and being influenced by the other. This interplay between recession and inflation is what economists call the recession-inflation nexus. Clearly, recession and inflation are two sides of the same coin. They can both cause and exacerbate each other, creating a complex, ever-changing dynamic that shapes the course of our economies. Now that we've seen the events of 2023 and understood the recession-inflation link, what are the key points to remember? Firstly, we delved into the causes of the 2023 recession. The pandemic-induced instability, coupled with trade tensions and policy decisions, led to a contraction in the global economy. Markets crashed, businesses shuttered, and individuals lost jobs. A classic recipe for recession. This downturn was not an isolated incident but a consequence of a series of interconnected events. Next, we examined inflation, a complex and often misunderstood concept. In simple terms, inflation is the rise in the general level of prices, which erodes the purchasing power of money. We saw how, in 2023, inflation skyrocketed due to various factors including increased government spending, disrupted supply chains, and soaring energy prices. Then, we explored the intricate relationship between recession and inflation. Traditionally, these two phenomena don't occur simultaneously. However, in 2023, we experienced stagflation, a rare economic situation where stagnant growth and high unemployment coexist with high inflation. This unusual combination presented unique challenges for policymakers and ordinary people alike. Lastly, we highlighted the implications of this recession-inflation nexus. It's not just about numbers and percentages, it's about real-life impact. Higher living costs and lower incomes mean that people struggle to make ends meet. Businesses too grapple with increased costs and decreased demand. Moreover, governments are left in a quandary, trying to strike a balance between stimulating the economy and controlling inflation. In essence, the 2023 recession and the accompanying inflation have underscored the interconnectedness of global economies and the vulnerability of our financial systems. It's a stark reminder of how macroeconomic trends can trickle down and affect everyday life. Remember, understanding these economic trends is the first step to navigating them effectively. Recession and inflation, two economic phenomena that often go hand in hand. They're not just academic concepts or terms thrown around in financial news. They're real, tangible forces that affect our everyday lives, from the price of groceries to the stability of our jobs. Understanding these concepts is about more than just gaining knowledge. It's about equipping ourselves to navigate the financial ebbs and flows of life. It's about knowing when to save, when to invest, when to tighten our belts, and when to ride the wave. The recession of 2023 and its accompanying inflation have proven once again the importance of staying informed. Economic trends are not always predictable, but they are always impactful. They shape our world in ways both big and small, from the global market down to our personal budgets. So, let's not be passive observers. Let's take charge of our financial futures. Let's read, question, and learn about the economy. Let's understand the forces that shape our lives and use that knowledge to make informed decisions. Recession and inflation may be daunting, but knowledge is power. The more we understand, the better prepared we are to face whatever comes our way. Because when it comes to the economy, it's not just about surviving, it's about thriving. And with that, we conclude our journey into the 2023 recession and the role of inflation. Stay savvy, stay informed.